G'day guys, this is Andrew Price here from blenderguru.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to create this classy drink advertisement. So this could be used for something like, I don't know, a Mount Franklin advert or another overpriced water company ad, I don't know. But basically, it's a lighting and rendering type study. We're going to be using the new Cycles rendering engine because previously you weren't really able to get realistic, water or fluid effects or glass, whatever, in the Blender internal render engine. But now that we've got Cycles, I thought it was a great opportunity to have a go at it, and I think it gives some nice looking results. So everything you see here is what we're going to be making in the tutorial. So we're going to start by modeling the glass itself, and then we're going to set up Cycles, so to get the reflective floor, the light in the backdrop, and as well as that, we're also going to be, of course, doing the fluid simulator, dropping the fluid into the cup, modeling a few ice cubes just to complete the scene, and putting some liquid on the ground as well. So yeah, hopefully having a bit of fun with this. And just to give credit where credit is due, the idea for this image right here came off iStock Photos. This person right here didn't really make much of an attempt to differ from what they've got here, but I thought it worked as kind of a basic lighting and rendering study. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. So first thing we're going to do is to model the glass. So the way we're going to do that is by adding a circle, and then we're going to change the amount of vertices to be 62. Oh, sorry, not 62, 16, because yeah, if you start with 32, then you have too many vertices later on when you use the subsurf modifier. And we're also going to turn on fill so that we get a yeah, you get faces in the middle there. Now you could use like a reference photo in the backdrop of a real glass if you wanted to model this, but I think it's pretty basic. It's just basically extrude it upwards all the way to the top and then scale it outwards. That's pretty much it. There's not really much else to it. And to give it some thickness to the glass, you could, if you wanted to, scale it inwards and downwards. But an easier way and a more accurate way is to just use the solidify modifier, and then you just turn up the thickness to be whatever you want. Don't go for too thick a glass like that, because then it just turns out looking stupid and heavy. Just make it as thin as you possibly can. So around about a 0.05 amount I found works pretty nicely. And next thing we're going to do is add some smoothness to these edges, because currently it looks like you probably cut your lip on that edge there. So we're going to add a subsurf modifier. Oh, actually, before we do that, let's just apply this solidify modifier first of all. Okay, so we've now got, yeah, everything is now part of the model, and we're also going to just grab these bottom vertices on the bottom there, and I'm just going to move them up just to create that layer that's usually at the foot of glasses. So just something like that. So it's just a little bit thick like that. All right, pretty good. And now we're going to add the subsurf modifier. And you can see that it's given us, if we turn the levels up to 3, just make it a bit smoother, it's given us this really smoothed out bottom look. Looks really ugly. So we're going to add in some loop cuts just by hitting Ctrl R and then dragging them down till it's almost at the very bottom there, like so. So it's nice and yeah, nice and tight looking. That's good. And we're also going to do the same for the top, like that, and then the same for the inside of the glass as well. Okay, so that's the outside, and then this is the inside. So make sure you get the right one. Bring that to the top, and then to get rid of that smoothed bottom, somewhere like that. And there you go. We now have a nice looking glass. Okay, so, ooh, let's put smooth shading. There we go. Okay. Alright, so this next step is pretty optional, but I've found it just makes it look a little bit nicer. We're going to create a few ribs on the outside of the glass. So, there's little rings that just help you hold the glass. I'm actually basing this off a glass that's sitting on the desk right next to me. It's one of those IKEA type ones. Looks pretty nice. Anyway, so to do this, what we're going to do is just add some loop cuts, like so. You just place two very close together and then just space them apart like so. And what we're going to do is then scale out some of these edge loops, and it's going to give us a nice kind of ribbed type look. And that's just going to help with the final look for the glass, because I found that just having just a basic glass, all smooth looking on the outside, it just, it wasn't really doing it for me in the final render. It just looked too clean. too perfect. So by having these ribs here, it looks a little bit more realistic. And yeah, just overall looks a little bit nicer. So the way we're going to do this, oh, one more at the top, like that. The way we're going to do this is to just grab these loops there and then just scale them out slightly. So we've got kind of a little lump there on the outside. And we just got to do them one by one. If you try and do them all at once, it's going to scale it and kind of rule up the vertical position of the of those loop cuts. So just do them one by one. Okay. And then just to make them look a little bit sharper as well, just going to select them all and then just turn up the median crease to be a 0.3 or something. I think that looks pretty nice. Alright, pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this right now, which you should get into the habit of doing. And alright, so now what we're going to do is get into cycles. So setting this all up with cycles, what we want is a reflective floor. We want a light in the backdrop. We want the glass to obviously look like glass, and we're going to point the camera over here. So first thing I'm going to do is just add a camera, because I don't have one in my scene yet. So I'm just going to add this in here. And I'm just going to move it back a little bit so it's exactly dead on down the front view axis, like so. And I'm actually going to zoom in the camera as well, make it about 60 focal length. That's just going to give a different sort of look to the image. If you have it like too close, it looks kind of a little bit too intimate, like you're getting up in the glass's grill. So just pull it back a little bit and zoom it in. It can give a different kind of look to it. You might want to experiment with that. And for the reflective floor, of course, add in a plane. Something about that size is good. And we're also going to add another plane, so you can just duplicate that one, rotate it by 90 degrees, and we're just putting that in the backdrop like so. So this is going to be our lamp, this is the floor obviously, and that's the glass. Yeah, pretty simple. Okay, so first thing I want to make sure is, because we're going to be using cycles, in the drop down here, make sure you have cycles selected. If you don't have that there, then check out my other tutorial, Introduction to Cycles. It'll show you, how you can turn it on or whatever. Basically, just download a new version of Blender which will have that there. Okay, so for the first thing we're going to do is turn this plane into a lamp. So add a new material, then from the drop down here we're going to select emission, and we're going to turn the strength of it up to 3. You might want to go brighter or lesser depending on what you want, but that should be nice. And now if we just turn on rendered viewport mode, you should see this right here. Okay, so it looks pretty bland, pretty, boring at the moment. So the first thing we're going to do is make the background completely black. So in the world settings, just change the color to be black, like so. Now for the cup itself, the glass, we're going to give it a new material and then just select glass. And you can see it's already looking very, very realistic. So one of the good things about using the Cycles rendering engine is that it, it just works. Just straight off the bat, it just looks great. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, I'll just scale up the plane just so that it fits the view a bit better. Okay, so with the plane here, what we want to do is give it a nice kind of frosted, blurred, mirrored type look to it. Now, if you just selected glossy from the drop down here, you would get that look. However, it's too reflective, and there's no way to actually turn down the amount of reflectivity for a glossy. You can only change the roughness of it, but you can't turn down the amount of it. So that's what it looks like at like 0 roughness. So it's like a 1-to-1 mirrored reflection. Yeah. Anyway, so to turn that down, what you need to do is actually use a mix shader and then combine a glossy shader with a diffuse shader. And now this will enable you to change between the two just by changing this factor amount at the top there. So all the way 1, it's going to use diffuse. All the way to 0, it's going to use all glossy. So we're going to set this to 0.2. So it's going to be a little bit of diffuse and then mostly reflectivity. And then for the roughness, I'm going to set that to be a 0.05. And there we go. We've now got that nice frosted floor. It's not too over the top, and it looks quite nice. Okay, now it's not very attractive in the background having a giant white plane there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a gradient to sort of give it a softer lamp type image, okay? So again, this came from the idea from the iStock photo there, just giving that nice kind of blue glow to it, okay? So what we're going to do is for the color, select image texture, okay? Now I'm going to use a texture that I created myself. It's very simple, it's just that. I would have created it in Blender using the paint tool, whatever, but the brush it wasn't big enough, it couldn't actually do that effect. So I had to use Photoshop, but you can use GIMP, or you can just use the image that I used. And then once you've added it, you won't see anything happen until you change the vector to be generated. And there we go. We now have that nice glowing orb in the background there, and it looks quite nice. So you can scale up the size of the plane in the background to suit you. Yeah, it's just kind of just finding the right mix, I suppose. It's got some banding issues there. I'm not sure. Maybe I used, because I created a number of different ones because I was trying to get rid of the banding issues, but I don't know. Something's happening. No, I think it's even worse now. All right. Well, it has banding issues, so there you go. Anyway, it's not too bad. So what we're going to do is next we're actually going to do the fluid itself. Okay, so let's just jump into the solid view mode now, because now that the scene is set up, we can get into the nitty-gritty details. Okay, so if you've never used the fluid simulator before, it's very, very simple. As with any simulator in Blender, you start with a cube, and that becomes your domain cube, which essentially acts as a boundary box for your simulation. So essentially no fluid is going to go outside of this box here. Just imagine it like a small glass aquarium. So the idea is that you want to make it small enough that it's not going to take too long to bake, because the bigger it is, it's going to take longer to bake, but also large enough that the water's not going to be hitting the edge and it's going to look obvious to the viewer that there's something going on there. So anyway, a size like that I found looks quite good, because we want the water to be pouring from the left-hand side over to there, so that's why I've left this space on the left side. And then go to the simulator options up there in the panel. Let me just move this stuff out of the way. And then just turn on fluid. And then in the drop-down box here, you've got a number of different types. The main one that you need to be aware of is domain, okay? So that's the main fluid settings. That's where all the fluid's going to be happening inside there. You only use one domain, and that's what we've got here. Now, you've got a whole number of different settings here. Don't worry if it looks all very confusing to you if you've never used it before. It's pretty basic once you understand it. It's I'll just walk you over a few of the basic steps right now. The main one is the resolution. I'm going to set this to 150. However, for my final one, I set it to 180. It's up to you what you do with it. Anyway, 150 is what I'm going to use now just to save time. And the other one is time. Speaking of time, most people do not adjust this setting at all. I'll just show you what it does. I've just got to turn my timeline on again. Basically, the time values here mean that it's going to render it's saying that the whole simulation is going to be 4 seconds long. However, you'll notice that down here, by default, you've got 250 frames of animation, which at 25 frames a second equals 10 seconds of animation. So what you've got is a 10-second Blender animation with a 4-second fluid simulation. So what it will do is it will actually drag out the whole 4 seconds of that simulation over the 10-second animation, essentially making it look like slow motion fluid. And that's why a lot of fluid simulations on YouTube and whatnot that you see around, they all look very slow motion-ish. That's because most people don't adjust that setting. So I'm actually going to adjust it. We're going to set this to 1, okay? And once you do that, you have to make sure that the timeline matches that. So set the timeline to be 25 frames, which of course, 25 frames a second equals 1 second. So 1, 1, it now matches. Perfect. The other big thing is to set up where you want the bake files to go. Now this is just basically creating a file, creating a folder on your computer. I just call it cache, just so I know. And then hit accept. Make sure you add a new folder. Don't put it in an existing folder, or else it's going to get mixed up with all your other files. It's just a pain. And then the other settings are down here under domain world. You've got real world size. Now essentially what this means is, what's the size of the domain cube if it was in the real world? So if you can imagine that this glass is, say, 10-15 centimeters high, you can imagine that this would be about, I don't know, 25 centimeters in real world size, like the size of this domain cube. So setting it to a 0.250. Now the other one is down here. You've got domain boundary and domain particles. So domain particles, that's the big one. That's how you're going to get the really tiny small droplets, which is going to add definition to the simulation. So I'm going to set this to 0.1. If you set it too high, it just comes out looking like a sprayed hose or something like that. Just gets too over the top. So 0.1 looks okay. However, the big thing you need to note is when you use generate particles, you need to turn up the subdivision to be at least 2. Now, I didn't used to know this. This is something that I found recently after going through the Blender wiki. And yeah, you won't see generate particles until you turn the subdivision amount up to 2. Now, if it was up to me, if it was my decision, I'd make it so that this actually grays out until you change that to 2. It's just one of those little annoyances you just find. So if there's a developer listening, maybe you want to do that. I don't know. It's yeah, it just seems like a gaping hole there in the Blender interface. But there you go. Anyway, so you got that set up. The other one is smoothing. I'm going to set this to 2. What that'll mean is it'll just smooth out the vertices a little bit more once it's baked, and it'll just make it look a little bit softer, and you won't get like harsh, jagged edges. The more smoothing you do, I think the longer it takes, and you don't want to go too much. Anyway, I'm going into too much detail here. Anyway, once you've got the domain set up, the next step is to add in your fluid object. Now, this can be any object you want. In this case, we're going to be using a UV sphere. And this is going to be acting as our inflow object. So this is going to be putting the water into this domain cube, and we want it to eject outwards in a continuous flow into the cup. So first thing you want to do is check the size of your inflow object. If it's too big, it's going to be like really flooding the scene quite big. Like, you know, just a small little adjustment to the size can just create a hugely different looking result. So just experiment with the size, see what works. Something like that, I think is going to be okay. I'm just roughing it by my eye. Anyway, that's not a sentence. Anyway, once you've got it, click on Fluid again in the simulator panel, and then select Inflow. And the only thing you need to adjust here is the inflow velocity, because we want it to be coming, you know, going in this direction, so we want it to have a starting X value. So we're going to set that to 1. Otherwise, it's just going to fall like gravity and just come out like a tap. The other important thing to note also is when you use inflow velocity, it pumps in the water faster. So it's essentially like turning on the tap. You know, the more you turn it on, the more water gets pumped into it. So just be wary of that as well. You will get a lot more water when you use these inflow velocities. The only other thing we need to do is with our cup here, we need to also make that part of the fluid simulation. And we do that by clicking on Fluid, then going Obstacle, and then from the volume initialization, we're going to select both. Okay, so that means it uses the outside of the shell as the obstacle as well as the volume. I just found it works better because sometimes the fluid can go through the cup. So anyway, setting it as both I think fixes that. Anyway, check you've got everything set up, because now we are at the baking stage. So it's going to take a little bit. It's going to take a little while to bake. So grab yourself a coffee while it's doing this. Go ahead and hit bake, and I'll see you once it's finished. Alright, well, mine hasn't finished baking. It's only about halfway, but I've got enough here. You can just cycle through the frames even when it hasn't finished baking. And I can see I've got enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and click that little X there, and it's now stopped. Now, to see it in its full glory, because you've got the final resolution of the fluid and you've got the preview. Now, currently in the viewport, it's only displaying the preview. So change that to final, and you'll be able to see how it looks in its full glory. So there you go. It's looking a little bit hectic. So if you just turn through the frames a little bit until you find one which you like. It's kind of hard to... Let's just move this down. Kind of hard to see with the all this stuff in the way, so I'm just going to hide all that. Okay, so I don't know, that's a little bit more hectic than my final example, but I think that one looks alright. Now you'll notice that the edge of the fluid there has this kind of weird looking pattern on the outside. So what we're going to have to do is use the sculpting brush to actually smooth that out. That's just one of those things you have to do. I'm not sure why it does that. Probably to do with the resolution or the smoothing. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it looks a little bit ugly, so we're going to have to fix that. So what we're going to have to do is apply the fluid before we can actually start sculpting. Now, I find it's good practice to duplicate the fluid first, just in case you want to go back and you know, do something with it later. So anyway, I've just duplicated it, and I'm going to hit apply on that fluid simulator. And I'm just going to grab this other one, which still has the fluid in the domain, and I'm going to move that to an odd layer. So let's just move it to, say, this layer over here. Blender might crash. Yep, there you go. It usually does. On cue. And I'm just going to reopen it, and let's try that again. Move it to another layer, and there we go. I don't know why, but it usually crashes the first time, and then you reopen it, and then it works. Anyway, so now we've got the fluid here, and I'm just going to go into edit mode. And you can see you've now got it completely frozen and ready for editing. So just jump to the sculpting mode, use a smoothing brush like this, And I'm just going to paint over these vertices right here. This is just going to clean it up, make it look a little bit neater in the final render. You don't have these ugly ziggy-zaggy lines everywhere. Yeah, it just helps clean that up a little bit. We're also going to be cleaning up some of those stray droplets that are sticking to the edge of the domain right now, just so that it doesn't look like the fluid happened in a domain, a little fish tank, whatever you want to refer to it as. Alright, it doesn't have to be completely clean, but something like that, I think. Oops, somewhere over here. Yeah. And there we go. Pretty cool. Alright. Now, yeah, to clear up these droplets along the side there, this is pretty easy. All you do is just go to the box select mode. Just select all of those along there. Then hit ctrl L so that you're selecting all the vertices attached to it. And then just delete those vertices. I'm also just going to turn on the display keys tool. There we go, just so you can see what I'm pressing again. There we go. And I can see there's still a few droplets there, isn't there? Okay. Let's just remove those again. Control L. Delete those. There's still... Oh, okay, hang on. I think it was not selecting the ones behind it. So let's try that again. Okay, there we go. Alright, so at least now it's got rid of that line of droplets there. You can also go into circle mode and just circular select mode, I should say, and just select a few of these just to make it look a little bit more odd. So it's not all just one lump on the side there. Now you could use like an outflow box and just place it over here, and that would get rid of some of the fluid that hit the edge, but I've found that it was still usually always there whether you used an outflow box or not, so I just find it's just easier just to edit it out later yourself. It's not too much of a deal there, so it's alright. Just clean that up a little bit more. Anyway, okay, so it's all set now. I'm just going to add in the toolbar, just turn on smooth shading mode. Going to bring back the rest of my scene here. You'll notice that the fluid is actually a little bit bigger than the cup there. That might happen sometimes. Very easy, just scale up the cup and it's just going to fix that for you. Now, for the fluid material, what we're going to do is just use a basic glass material. Now, the glass material works for glass, and it's pretty much identical, you know, material settings for glass and water. The only difference is the IOR. Now, IOR stands for index of refraction, which refers to a real world value of how light is refracted when you look through transparent objects. So when you look through, you know, a crystal ball, if you do that a lot, I don't know, you'll notice that obviously things are distorted and twisted on the outside. Now, water distorts at a different amount than glass, so you might have to go online to look up these values for yourself. So I just went online and oh, it's not there. I thought it was in my tabs. Anyway, let's just do it. Index of refraction. This just helps your work look a little bit more realistic than otherwise. If you find these values yourself, yeah, you can get things physically accurate. So this is just a list of all different values for different things. The one we need here is for water, and you can see that the water you've got for different temperature amounts. I didn't know that they would change, but anyway, for just 20 degrees Celsius, well, I'm just going to set the value to be 1.33. Okay, so 1.33, like so. And other than that, it should be good to go. So let's just switch to rendered viewport shading mode again. And oh, one other thing I'm going to do is just change the rendering device from CPU to GPU, because my GPU is faster than my my CPU. So there we go. Okay, so you can now see the fluid is going into the glass. It looks a little bit weird. Looks a little bit dark. So one of the things we're going to do is change the color of the fluid and the glass. Okay, now by default everything in Blender, it gives you a 0.8, you know, which is like not fully white, but you know, white enough. And normally I would suggest leaving it at 0.8 because that works better for different values when you add more lighting, etc. But in this case, we're going to turn the white amount all the way up to solid white, so 111, yeah, on the RGB values there. And we're going to do the same for the glass as well. So just going to select the glass there and then just do the same. And you can see you've got some water going through there. It looks a little bit strange, I'll admit, because oh, it's going through different frames. Hang on a moment. Yeah, it looks a little bit strange because we've got the fluid in front of the glass there. I think for my other one where I didn't have as much fluid, yeah, it just sort of, you could see through it a little bit better. But in this one, it's yeah, it's there, and it's you can see it in all its glory. But anyway, it's not too bad. It's going for a different look. It's not, yeah, it's okay. So what we're going to do next is model in the ice cubes. Okay, so to do that, it's pretty simple. You might have already followed one of my past tutorials where I showed you how to do this. But this is just going to be a speedy version of that. What we're going to do is start with a cube, and we're going to subdivide that cube twice. Add a subsurf modifier of 2 by hitting Ctrl 2, like so. And let's just turn on smooth shading. Actually, you might turn that up to 3 like that. And we're going to give it a material. Let's make it glass. But the most important thing we're going to do is add a texture. And this texture here, we're just going to call this ice displace. And let's just turn the size of that. Oh, no, actually, I'll just show you what it does first of all. We're going to add a displace modifier after our subsurf modifier. This is going to be displace. And for that, of course, it needs a texture. So that's why I just added a texture just then. So we're going to use ice displace, like so. And, oh, you can see it's got a displace setting now in the modifier for the texture. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. Anyway, cool. Just turn this size amount up to be something that looks good. I don't know, 0.2, that's okay. And then you can turn the displace value down to, I don't know, yeah, whatever. I just described this really badly. Sorry for my poor explanation there. But anyway, hopefully that makes sense. That's just essentially giving it some twisted, you know, displaced looking surface. And then just for the sake of, you know, so that it scales from the right point, just put it up to that, you know, in edit mode, move it up so the origin point is at the bottom of the ice cube. That just kind of helps. Okay, so now I'm just going to duplicate, actually no, I'm going to keep that there. To create the bubbles, that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to add a plane. And I'm just going to position this sort of in the middle of the ice cube there. And I'm going to subdivide it many times. Some people ask me why I continually hit subdivide instead of just changing the number of cuts there. I don't know why. Maybe it's just an old habit. It's not too big of a deal. I'm going to go into proportional editing mode now. Sorry, I should always explain what I'm doing, shouldn't I? What we're going to be doing is creating a really wavy displaced surface so that we can then use a particle system to drop little bubbles all over the surface, and yeah, it's just going to make it look as though they're kind of hovering in suspended space. This just saves us the time of having to place the little bubbles hand in hand. You can just use a particle system very quickly. Anyway, so with that middle vertice there selected, and then proportional editing turned on, I'm going to change the editing fall off to be random. And now when I move that middle vertice, you can see that it's creating like this kind of spiked effect. It's creating that effect there, which looks really ugly, but that's not actually going to be showing up in the render. It's only going to be using our particles to show up in the render. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is add in the bubbles. Okay, so we only need to create 1 or 2 bubbles, and then it's going to use that over the surface of the particles. So I'm just going to add a UV sphere, change the amount of segments of that to be 6 for both the rings and the segments, because if you make it too high res, then it's going to be, yeah, it's going to really slow down the renders. So that looks fine. Turn on smooth shading, like so. Let's just scale that to 0.1 like that. And then for the particle system, so with this spiky object here selected, add a new particle system, set that to hair, turn on advanced, and then down here underneath rendering, just change that to object, and then select the name of the sphere that you just created, which should be sphere.001. Okay, now for the size of these, it's up to you. I'm going to turn these down to, oh, just move that out of the way. Yeah, 0.01 for the size, and then turn the randomized size up to 1 as well. You can use 2 particle systems. In fact, I might, yeah, set that to 100, because you want some big bubbles and then you want some smaller bubbles. Now, normally I'd suggest using a group and then you know, changing the count of that group in the particles, but something's happened with the latest version of Blender and the groups doesn't work properly, so we're actually going to have to use 2 particle systems. It's a little bit annoying, but that's what we're going to do. So I'll just turn the randomized size off. I'm going to call this particle system big, and this one I'm going to call small. Let's just change that. Duplicate that particle system we just created. This one I'm going to make the number of it 400 bubbles, and the size of it is going to be a lot smaller. So just turn down the normal amount to be, I don't know, 0.2, I think. Maybe that's too small. 0.3. That should be okay. Yeah, I think that should be cool. Alright, and you might just turn up the size of those bigger bubbles now. Just so that they're a little bit bigger. Oh, maybe that's too much. Alright. This is very fiddly work. And you've got to have two particle systems. Anyway, okay. And the other thing is you'd normally have to turn off like render in the particle settings here. So that for the emitter, like it doesn't render this spiky object. However, I think there's a bug in the latest version of Cycles or whatever. So that it still always shows up the... like it always doesn't show the emitter in the rendered cycles. So I've just lost my train of thought. I'm explaining this very poorly. Anyway, okay. So now I've got that set up. That should now be ready to go. We're just going to add in our material settings for the ice. So let's just call this one ice. And the index of refraction, again, you want to check that chart that we had before. So for ice, you can see it is 1.309. So we can do that now. 1.309. And the color, again, we're going to turn that all the way up. And then just make sure that our sphere there, a little bubble sphere, has the exact same materials, like so. And then just so that it's a little bit easier to move around, just make this spiky object a parent to the main ice cube there. So now you can move it around and the spiky thing will move around as well. Okay, cool. So bring back the rest of our scene now. And I want to scale the cube down so it's a little bit more realistic. So something about that I think should be fine. Just going to rotate that, duplicate it. Oh, make sure you duplicate the bubbles as well. Place it like so. I'm not sure if that's too small or not, but it'll do, I think. And I'm just going to duplicate it once more. I'm going to place one over here. And this one I want to make it look like it's melted a little bit. So I'm just going to go into sculpting mode. Oh, those are quite big there, aren't they? Hang on, what's happened? Okay, so the size of our of our huge bubbles there, I think I just turned them up way too much. Let's just turn that down again. See, it's still big, isn't it? Hang on. Sorry. This is quite poor. Yeah, anyway, that'll do, I think. Alright, wow, this tutorial is really falling apart. Okay, so let's go into sculpting mode for this ice cube here. We just want it to make it, again, make it look like it's falling apart. So I'm just going to apply the subsurf for the displace for both of those modifiers right there. And I'm just going to go into brush mode, turn on subtract, and I'm just going to, yeah, just very simply, just piece away at this. Make it look like it's melted. So you can have a look at some reference photos of real melted ice cubes if you want. Or you can just play it by ear like this. I think the brush is a little bit too much, but anyway, it's alright. I'm just going to smooth it out as well, just to get rid of any overlapping catastrophes that might have just happened. And I'll just smooth that one off as well. Okay, that looks alright. And then I'm just going to just scale down these bubbles here as well, just so they're not sticking out of the ice. Pretty simple. Okay, cool. So if everything's right and you've got the ice material affecting everything, it should be now ready to go. So let's we might have to. Oh yeah, that's right. We're going to add the liquid as well underneath those ice cubes. But let's just give it a quick little test render now. See how the scene is all piecing together, and you can see it's coming together quite nicely. It's not bad. I think I could possibly increase the where those bubbles are appearing there, but that's okay. Let's just change that. Like so. Just so that they're more kind of evenly displaced everywhere. And I might also, again, just turn down the size of those bubbles, the bigger bubbles, so that they're not too obvious and in your face. And I'll make these smaller bubbles a little bit smaller. The other thing I'm going to do is just put a few ice cubes in the glass itself. So I'm just going to duplicate that, put this one in here, and then this one here, making it look like it's kind of been thrown up in the air. Like so. I think that should look pretty nice. And for the liquid on the ground, because I said we were going to do that, this is really simple. I was kind of thinking like how I would go about creating it, and it turns out it is actually really, really easy. You just add a plane, subdivide it heaps of times, like I am doing right now. and then just place it wherever you want the fluid to be, like so. And then just place it underneath the ground, okay? So just like that, just slightly underneath it. And then go into sculpting mode, turn on brush, set it to add, and then just sculpt in where you want. Actually, it can actually help, yeah, if you just go into just edit mode and then proportional editing, and then check sphere in the proportional editing, because if you use the sculpting one, you can get kind of uneven looking surfaces. Forgot about that. Anyway, just go into proportional editing mode like this, and this will allow you to create nice raised liquid surfaces like this quite easily. It's quite easy indeed. So let's just move that up a little bit. There you go, got some nice liquid there. And I'm just going to duplicate that, place it over here, and then we can go into sculpting mode, put it into subtract like this, and you can kind of just fiddle around with how the fluid looks. Like that, and I'll just do something with this one as well. Try not to do the same thing, of course. Oh, you want that one a little bit there. Just looks weird. And turn on smooth shading for both of those. And we want to give this the same material as the water. So with those there selected, select the water, hit Ctrl L and then materials, and they've now all got the exact same material. You might even want to rename the material, just so you know, call it water. Anyway, let's give this a little render now, see how it goes. The fluid looks a little bit funny, as we saw before. It looks a little bit different to the way my other one finished, but it's not too bad. You can sort of get the gist of how it all works out. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you picked up a few little tips that you could use for your future renders. Cycles is really fun. Do experiment with it. It's great for photorealistic stuff like this that you might be wanting to use it for. It's just great. So let's just show the final render there again. There you go, guys. Hope you had fun, and I will see you next time.